I bet you have tried everything to get those hips open at impact. It can be so frustrating when those hips kind of thrust out toward the ball and you have to throw your arms at it, flip the club. It just makes you wildly inconsistent and you lose a lot of distance. And this was actually a big issue for me until I found this one feel that really changed everything for me. I'm really excited to share that with you today. So you may not know this about me, but I actually have a mechanical engineering degree. So for me, it's really good for me to understand things in more of a mechanical sense. So if you think about it in this way, it can really, really help you. So the way I like to think about it is like the hips are like a door that's on hinges and it's opening back behind you throughout the swing. So I have this piece of wood here with a hinge on it to really help illustrate this. So in the backswing, what we want to imagine here is that our lead hip is on a hinge. Right? And the reason why that is important is that a hinge is a fixed pivot point, right? So that's what we want to feel like in the backswing, is that our lead hip is a hinge that is a fixed pivot point and that our trail hip is moving back behind us. That's what we want to feel, because the biggest reason why, or not one of the biggest, but maybe even the biggest reason why I see a lot of people struggle with getting the hips open at impact, it starts in the very beginning of the swing. It's just a domino effect. What I see people do is they'll actually start moving their hips and getting out on their toes, moving the hips toward the ball, getting out on their toes in the start of the backswing. And what we want to do is we want to be pushing this trail hip back and actually kind of moving down toward the golf ball with our upper body in the backswing. That's what we're going to see with all the best players, is as they get up to the top of the swing, their upper body actually moves down a little bit and then it continues to kind of move down in the start of the downswing. And that can't happen unless we are moving the hips properly. Now keep in mind, these are exaggerations, right? Your lead hip is actually moving a little bit toward the golf ball in the backswing, but this exaggerated feeling is really going to help you to get your hips moving the right way. The other thing we want to realize here is that, as you notice, I have this piece of wood kind of angled down. Our hips are at a tilt. We don't want to have our hips really level. If my hips are level, then that just makes me want to kind of level out my shoulders. So I want to have my hips kind of pointed more down toward the golf ball, and imagine that this lead hip is fixed and my trail hip's kind of moving back behind me. So that's the backswing feeling. And I want to imagine here that my belt buckle here, if you imagine there's a laser pointing on my belt buckle here, that kind of traces back behind the golf ball as I'm going back. And as I'm doing that, I'm also going to be kind of straightening out my trail leg. You see, what a lot of people do is they try to keep that trail leg flexed, right? We try to keep flexing that trail leg. You've probably heard, instruction from a long time ago saying you kind of want to resist the rotation of your hips in the backswing. That's not at all what we want to do. We want to have freedom of rotation. We want to really move those hips back. And in order to do that, we've got to kind of straighten out this trail leg to move this trail hip back and behind the golf ball. So that's the backswing feeling. Hips tilted down, hinge at the lead hip, right hip's kind of moving back behind you in the backswing. Now in the downswing, it's just the opposite. I'm just going to turn this around, and now my trail hip is the fixed hinge point, right? So my trail hip's moved back away from the golf ball, and now I want to have the feeling that at this point in the swing, that my trail hip doesn't move anywhere near the golf ball. And what actually happens is that my lead hip moves back away from the golf ball in the downswing, right? So in the backswing, right hip moves back like this, and then the downswing, I want to feel like this is the fixed hinge point, and then my lead hip moves back behind me. And you're going to see here how I'm much more in my heels as I'm doing this. If you're someone who comes up out of your posture, you move your hips forward, you're typically going to feel a lot of pressure in your toes throughout the swing. That's a lot of the times what's happening. I'm typically on my toes in my backswing and in the downswing, definitely in the downswing at impact. So in order to get this to work properly, we need to feel like we're more in our heels as we're doing this. Look, if I'm in my heels and I'm pushing my hips back, which I have to do, if this is my hinge point, right, in order for this to be the hinge point, the fixed point, and for me to move my lead hip back and around, I have to push my hips back. And that is a big piece of this. If our hips are moving forward, then I have to stand up out of it, right? If I were to move my hips forward and then stay in my posture, I'm going to fall on my face. So in order for me to push my hips back, I have to move my chest down more. You've probably heard the term covering the ball. That's what we're doing. We're getting on top of the ball. We're covering the ball with our upper body. That's what we want to do. And that's going to allow you to get into the good impact position that we see Dustin Johnson, Colin Morikawa, and players like that. Really, really good ball strikers. They're moving their hips in this way. So now if we grab the golf club, we want to have those same feelings in the swing. So that's kind of the visual that we want to have. Lead hip fixed in the backswing, trail hip moving back. In the downswing, trail hip fixed, lead hip moving back. And you see as I'm doing that, I'm just moving my hips back, getting in my heels, and I'm moving my upper body down. If I do that with the golf club, right, trail hip, and if you look on video, you might see my lead hip moving a little bit toward the ball, and you might see my lead hip moving a little bit toward the ball in the backswing. You might see my trail hip moving a little bit toward the ball in the downswing. But keep in mind, these are just feels. This isn't the reality of what tour players are doing. The reality of what tour players are doing is that the center of their hips are staying pretty much the same distance away from the golf ball. They're not moving much closer to the golf ball. So the lead hip does move a little bit closer in the backswing, and the trail hip does move a little bit closer in the downswing. But what most people are doing is they're moving their hips, all of their hips, right, the trail hip and the lead hip, closer to the golf ball throughout the entire swing, and that's where the issues come from. So if you can exaggerate the feeling of, okay, this is fixed, this is moving back in the backswing, this is fixed, this is moving back in the downswing, well, now that's really exaggerated, and that's going to get me in the right place that I want to be. All right, so if I have that feeling with the club now, I'm going to go trail hip fixed, or excuse me, lead hip fixed, trail hip moving back, trail leg kind of straightening out, and then the downswing, I'm going to feel trail hip fixed, lead hip moving out of the way, and you can see what I have to do. I have to move my chest down, and look at this crazy impact position that I have to get into with this feel, right? This is a 7-iron, and I'm taking, I can't hardly see any loft on that face. I'm getting so much shaft and compression. Now, would I really want to do that in the golf swing? No, but this is an exaggerated feel that you need to have to get to where you want to be. If you're someone who's doing this, right, I'm moving my hips toward the ball. I'm like this at impact. I'm adding lots of loft. I have no shaft lean. I need to feel, right, I need to feel something like this to get to where I'm in a position that's more like this, right? It's the fault, feel, reel approach. The fault is the hips moving toward the ball. The feel is the hips never moving toward the ball. Any part of the hips is never moving toward the ball in order for me to get the hips to move in a better way. The way I would think about this is I would think about it in the sense that you cannot exaggerate it too much, especially in the beginning stages. Because the reality is that let's say that you do exaggerate it too much. You do get into this kind of impact position. I tell you what, that would be pretty dang awesome. I don't see it, I don't really see it ever, but that would be really awesome if you could do that, because then from there, all you have to do is just ease off it a little bit to get the position that you want. What most likely is going to happen is that you're going to just move a lot closer to where you want to be if you do that, all right? So work on these hip movements, and you're going to get your hips moving in the right way, and I hope this really opens the door for you. Now, we still have a problem here. You see, when you're someone who moves your hips in the wrong way, right, your hips move forward, what tends to happen is you're going to come down steep with your club, right, because that pairs up with it. If you don't come down steep, let's say that I moved my hips forward like I was doing before, moved my hips improperly, but I shallowed out the club really well. Well, if I did that, well, look what happens to the club. That club works way too far from the inside. If I can even make contact with the golf ball, I'm going to hit a big snap hook, right? Most likely what's going to happen is I'm just going to chunk it or top it, right? So what I need to be doing when I get this good hip movement now is I need to get the club shallowing out, because before you're probably coming down steep. Now, if I move my hips in this new proper way and I come down steep, well, look what happens. I'm just going to chop down into that ball. So we have to pair up this proper hip movement now. Now that we're getting the hips to open up properly, we have to pair that up with shallowing out the club. I got to get this club. Now that I get this club shallowing out, now I can more easily rotate my body. You're going to have a really hard time. You're going to be fighting getting these hips to move. You know, you may know how to move it, and this feel may look really good and feel really good, and you may be able to do it without the club in your hands. But once you get that club in your hands, everything may change, because your brain knows you're not going to be able to hit a functional shot with the hips opening up if we don't get the club shallowing out. So what I want you to do now is I want you to pair up this hip feel with what we call the anti-roll method, and this is really my favorite drill for getting this club face in a better position and getting that club shallowing out as we're coming down. If you pair that up with this, you're gonna start hitting some of the best shots of your life. So I'm gonna play a preview of this anti-roll method drill here in a second, but if you wanna see this whole video, you wanna be able to pair this up, this proper hip movement with the best drill for shallowing out the club, all you have to do is click the iCard that's gonna appear up on your screen. If you don't see the iCard, no worries, just click the link in the description below, but pair these two feelings up, and you're gonna start hitting some of the best shots of your life. Play well, and I'll talk to you soon.
Bottom line, if you've been taught to roll the club in the early downswing, that causes the shaft to get steep, and that steep club causes all your problems. It causes you to hit it way behind the big hitters, and way inconsistent with your quality of strikes. So you're in the tall grass and the trees and the hazards all day long. Now the great news is this, there's really only two pieces that you need to know to fix all these problems. The first one is we need to learn the proper way to square up the club face. Instead of rolling the forearms and getting steep, there's another way that the pros do this. Once you learn this right way to square up the club face, then you can shallow out from the inside and everything starts to fit together. Now I'm going to teach you this right now in what I call the anti-roll method. You may also hear this called the motorcycle move or the tour twist, but let's walk through exactly how to do that. Now what I want you to do is go ahead and go kind of in the last parallel in the downswing. So here, I want my hips to go ahead and be opening up. I want my club to be parallel with the ground, and I want my hands to be in front of my right thigh. Now when I take my grip, you're going to notice that when I do this, the club face is basically straight up and down. So if I'm looking at it from this angle, you'll see the face is straight up and down, and my logo of my glove is pointed out in front of me. Now from there,